Well, I had some requests. I never had any requests, but I have various ways I might try to communicate with you. I don't even know if poems can communicate anything. I feel very kind of despairing about it, but so I thought about at the beginning of this new book of mine, some different writers that I felt reverence for, and I thought, wow, they came to some bad ends, some of these guys. And I thought, what is it? Why does anybody do it? There's all these people who want to do it. Why? If I ever have one of the rare times I've taught, if I have a talented student, the first thing I do is try to dissuade them from becoming a writer. But I noticed the first pieces in the book were about writers or writing. The very first piece is kind of silly, but it's called Winter Sleep. I was having trouble sleeping. I don't know how long I'd been lying there and listening to the blizzard when I had the most vivid impression that it was a blizzard in Minneapolis in 1959. And I found this disturbing. I knew it would now have to turn on its lamp, get out of bed, and try to write about me. And of course, no matter what it wrote, it would just sound like something it had made up. But in the end, it decided to stay put, turn over, and keep me to itself. I think that was the right thing to do. After all, it was only a blizzard in Minneapolis in 1959. How are you supposed to describe something like me? When we think about it, why should you try? Why should you even care? Oh, I should point out that I don't know what any of these poems mean. Except that some of them are closer to being connected to real events in my life, like this next one. It's called Woman Falling. I had made friends recently with a great poet, Deborah Diggs, and a couple of years after I became friends with her, she was only, I guess she was 59. She took her life, or whatever the expression is. The Germans say Selbstmord. Like, get right to the point, self-murder. Woman Falling, I don't know, she apparently, and I know she had no mental illness issues or anything. She just got a little bit more than she could take. I can respect that. It makes me terribly sad. So she fell from what is it, like UC Amherst, the lacrosse stadium or something. It's so interesting you should suddenly be here. How did that happen? In your favorite place, this witchy old orange orchard, the very spot where it gives the impression of stretching forever in every direction. All those spokes from where you stand between the trees, within sight of the 3-story house, painted the same shade of white, and right about the same size as this lone beehive you stand looking down at a moment. No one has lived here for as long as you've known it, kept it a secret, parked off the highway, and walking a mile down the nameless dirt road in a windy and shadowy brightness. Wind from the sun, you would say, in your mind, if I know you as I do not, and never will now, no one will anymore. You have made sure of that, but I can picture you saying it. I'm not bothering anyone. I don't even know where it is. That's the point. No one did. No one knew how to reach you. In the one vacant room with a mattress, you even spent a night sometimes. Honeysuckle Southern California dawn wind blowing through the glassless windows and over your body, over your hair. Maybe God would let me be the wind, but I don't even know what God thinks either. I just like to imagine you all at once finding yourself in that place, walking along without anyone knowing. That was the haunting, that was always the fun, and stretching before you a whole day of wandering and singing alone in the instant right before the one in which your body meets the earth at last. I stole something from Virginia Woolf in there, but I'll have to make a note. This is called Nietzsche's Mirror. I don't really know if this is even true. Charles Simic told me this story, and I was young enough to. He might have been just putting me on. I've studied Nietzsche's biography, and I'm not sure, but what's true? Yeah. Nietzsche's Mirror. The final breakdown coincides, it said, with his botched intervention in the savage beating of a horse in Turin there, the sight of which perhaps brought to mind the pedagogical methods employed long ago by Dad, the good pastor. The final train journey home is uneventful, safe arrival ensured by the company of burly individuals who, while not given to deep speculation, observe with increasing fascination the professor's inability to resist removing a small mirror from the inside of his jacket every few minutes and studying minutely with an expression of horrified astonishment his own face. When questioned at last regarding this activity, or imagining he has thus been questioned, he replies, or so it seems, with a query of his own, succinctly posed. Is it true that I am here? After prolonged consideration, involving incidentally the prefiguration and dismissal of Husserl's suspension of belief strategy, he continues without ever once moving his lips along the same track. If, as so appears, I am still present, how long can this state of affairs be expected to last? Approximately how long, that is, must I go on enduring it, and why? At this point, it's conceivable that having nothing better to do, he will begin the mental composition of a series of letters to be set down and mailed in material form later, bearing the singular signature of the crucified one and addressed to a variety of European dignitaries, suggesting in the strongest possible terms the military overthrow and occupation of his German homeland. In long retrospect, the reaction to these urgent messages is not difficult to imagine. So much the worse for the recipients. It will be a couple of decades before his mad admonishments may be perceived for what they were. A pretty damn good idea, if anyone recalls them at all. And how unfortunate for the millions of slaughtered young men who had not even been born yet. Oh well, they will be mailed nevertheless after he has been delivered into the care of his mother, a fate I would prefer not to dwell on. During the 11 years that remain to him, confined to his old boyhood room, he will soon lapse into more or less total silence. I know I would. Broken only occasionally by a lengthy and unpunctuated scream. The next one's about Baudelaire, but it's even darker. I can't, it's too much for me. This is about Basho, Matsuo Basho, who is as great a figure in world literature as Shakespeare, I believe. It's called The Poet, 1644 to 1694. To suddenly perceive the world as if it were something you had never seen before, and to grasp for an instant, mutely enduring the shock of total comprehension, the outrageous unlikelihood of being here to witness it, and of its being here at all. This is a matter of grace, but also a cruel and conditional ecstasy, one no mental effort can prolong, one that in fact consists of the grievous poignancy with which it bleeds away, fading and vanishing almost before it has fully begun, lasting only long enough to leave you with the familiar sense of missing out on something raised to a more desolate power by the discovery of what it is. Look at this staggering sight. New leaves shining with the light that's come here from the sun. Even if they can't recall it or outright deny it, everyone knows of this eerie event for which they found no name. But how many will spend their days readying themselves for what may well never recur? How many will devote the rest of their lives to the preposterous discipline of waiting and maintaining constant vigilance for a glimpse of what they can no longer see, of inwardly orienting themselves to a direction that does not exist, and who among them will gradually shed year by year every vestige of hope of a place in the world, becoming increasingly familiar with the taste of fear. This is no occupation for an adult who can look other adults in the eye, carry his own weight, and count himself one of them. I just don't understand how a grown man could spend his time doing something like writing poetry. That's what my friend Bruce Weigel's father said to him. He's a foreman in a steel factory outside Cleveland. I just don't understand how a grown man could spend his time doing something like writing poetry. This was not a career. This was a fate, a disaster. Hand in hand, the blind child and his mother stand admiring the new cherry blossoms forever, because someone spent his life watching for them and preparing to endure once again a condition of illumination, then exercising the mastery that enabled him to store it in its purest form for the benefit of others, most of whom were not yet born, before moving on, exhausted and ill, and by now without even the hope of returning to rest in the comfort of the little house his friends had made available. Dear to him once, and now in his feverish delirium, comfortably surrounding and sheltering him once again, like the bronze shell of the snail that has blindly strayed from the tall grass to cross a damp dirt road and intersect as it was born to with the great wheel getting closer. And if, in spite of having perished of old age at 49, over 3 centuries ago, while making his way on foot across the fields and mountains of Japan, Matsuo Basho were to appear in this country of millions of aging adolescents on the first day of class in need of an advanced degree, having lost his or used it to make a small fire in another time, chances are only one of his classmates would even have heard of him. The one who never raises her hand, I'll bet, stunned into smiling for the first time in history and hurriedly making a place for him next to her. I'm done with those. Here's a couple that'll really, like, if you thought those would, like, these will bring you right down. And, like, here's a couple that I go into, at least I was able, in many poems in the book, I was able to write poems that addressed my wife in many different sorts of ways. And these two sort of do that. This is called The Yes. Each day for years it gets up at first light, lets the dove out and stands in the doorway looking at the soft blue Arkansas sky without waking. But never you mind, it will be packing its small suitcase soon. It will leave the keys dangling from the lock and set out at last. Across the Raven's Brook and barefoot through the pathless wood of books, already it is traveling toward me. Somehow I know this. Though blinded as I leave the outer brilliance, though the stench of urine hit me like a blow, and once more in the blink of an eye, I am back at my watch, pretty mauled by a vicious cycle, right in the middle of raising a 20-pound shot glass toward the general vicinity of my lips, the way a ruined jeweler might gradually guide from long habit the loop to an empty eye socket. But the suicides you always have with you. Maybe I'm just cruising around late at night and waiting at what is already the longest red light in Western history. No other car in sight, never will be, not in my private city, scared, sick. I'm the very last person, the VLP, abandoned to man by himself this glass-bottomed space station. One more ragged meat bone will always have haunting us, floating in a gray soup of its own filth and misery. What are you going to do? Let's say later on I happen to hang a sharp left for no reason I can think of at an unfamiliar corner, just in time to glimpse a small three-legged dog making his way down the black sidewalk. And finally I ask to be given a new name, which nobody knows, and a new heart. In ascending progressions, the first dawn waves traversing that universe where the more you disappear, the more vividly present you become, where the slower the velocity, the sooner the time of arrival. The answer is on its way. And this is called Deep Revisions. I look up from this, we're on this beach we go to, but we like to go there in the winter. Little Compton in Rhode Island. My wife is from Rhode Island. To me, New England was the last place I expected to end up. It's like being like a permanent alien, you know. I like it though. But it's like the Deep South. As soon as you open your mouth, you're pegged for like, you're not from here. As soon as I get off the plane in the Midwest, I want to get down on my hands and knees and beg to like stay here. I look up from this unfolded page I've discovered, for the hand has its memories in my back pocket to find you are gone. After some more time has passed, so anyway, the scene is the beach, but it's in the winter. We like to go there in the winter because we're crazy. After some more time has passed, time spent decoding its runic and largely illegible messages meant clearly for these eyes alone. Surprise, a pen appears in my hand. And while I myself might appear to be nothing but somebody's body hunched down between low, grassy dunes, shielding itself from the cold, I am already traveling back. I am elsewhere, alas, very elsewhere, amen. But when I look up, you're still gone. And does this put a stop to it, whatever it is I am doing, wherever I am? That the thoughtful thing at this point might be to interrupt my work, or whatever it is I imagine I've been doing all my life, and take a walk in search of you. Occurs to me, it does. And do I follow through? Does he so bestir himself, you may well ask? Not I. I am already off again, a new obstacle having presented itself in the form of numb fingers requiring a glove. Then, that somewhat hampered progress, once sheathed in thick black leather padding, not to mention the minds, now distracted by hands' new resemblance to that of some non-Homo sapien primates, a gorilla's, say, one struck by lightning and oddly thereafter compelled to take up composition. Not of lyrical fragments, let's hope, for its sake, as surely it stands a vastly improved chance of making a living by authoring a mass-market novel, perhaps the ever-popular memoir. In its case, one bound for bestsellerdom, clearly. I look up, and still you are nowhere to be seen, still unfound, leaving me bereft of any company but that of low-grade terror in the guise of the winter Atlantic, that wind-blown dark emerald and seemingly infinite plain upon whose horizon we one day, so long ago, in our frail craft first appeared, God forgive us, the battered catastronauts. Though to look on the bright side, so too did the disillusioned Jefferson, no doubt doubly depressed now on his way back from France, illustrious runner-up for best failed and betrayed revolution. I can almost see his still faraway sail when suddenly tearing the page from my fingers. Goodbye, goodbye, lousy page, childlike kite, white shirt left on shore by the swimmer who won't be needing it anymore. The overarching dilemma remains, increasingly remains, as the early dark deepens. No, you. I am ready to confess it's beginning to get to me, and by way of emphasis, I am fully prepared to stand up here before the first merciless stars in silent beseeching, to look up and down, to look both ways, to call out if need be, which way have you gone? This winter beach, this narrow desert, it isn't all that long. What is wrong with me? How could I have lost track of you? I know that it was just a little walk you went on, tactfully allowing me to concentrate, and I am concentrating all right. My mind filled to the exclusion of all else by a small evil voice, oh, see her walk, whitely walking on the waves. And this is all bullshit. I don't even want to work. I'm sick to death of it. I don't want to write anything ever. I just want you. So I'm going to read. These were a poem, a prose poem, whatever you want to call it, and not a poem, but I turned the middle one into a verse poem last night. That's why I'm kind of tired, I think. But just three poems that seemed to sort of go together, and they were requested. It was a request. You don't turn down a request when you're a poet. If you're Bob Dylan or something, you go, shut up. But not if you're a poet. So these poems come in another book, in the next book, which is called F. And He really is. And I don't know how I got away with that, but so these are really from that. It's called 4 in the Morning. Wind from the stars. The world is uneasily happy. Everything will be forgotten. The bird I've never seen sang its brainless head off, same voice, same hour, until I woke and closed my eyes. There it stood again, wood's edge and depression's deepening shade inviting me in, saying, no one is here. No one was there to be ashamed of me. And this is called Peach Tree. I have a small peach tree that grows in my backyard, and it bewilders me very much in Boston to find a peach tree in my backyard. Light wind is blindly blessing one by one the dark buds of the small backbent peach trees, unnoted return to its place. At first light, gray, I stand beside this tree, my height, such fragile branches as of bark-covered glass. How did we survive another winter? But here we are in your green spot, these hidden dead-end streets lying low, 5 years of salvation, dear to me. And now, oddly, final address, and I had often wondered where it would finally find me. So, one more northern spring has been granted me as well, Peachtree. You look good. You look like you could go on doing that forever. Me, I have no idea what I look like. All that is over with. That lifelong living in a mirror. One afternoon, I noticed it had stopped. I couldn't anymore, and that was that. Wish I'd thought of it sooner. Meanwhile, I am trembling with the effort not to break between thumb and forefinger this one small branch I identify with. It recedes as I reach out to touch its minute rows of darkest green beginnings, infolded, those growths fated to turn into hard, stunted fruit. I wish I could burrow inside one, past stone-like rind, into one of identical pink clenched eyelids, and curl up the size of a comma and wait there alone with everyone else in the darkness before they were born. How did we ever drift into this chill state? I'm feeling pretty bent in half myself, and I see us both bound for the fire along Peachtree, then nothing, pure spirit, even Lazarus must die. What have I been so afraid of all my life? This is called Crumpled Up Note Blowing Away. Were no one here to witness it, could the sun be said to shine? Clearly, you pedantic fool. But I've said all that I had to say in writing. I signed my name. It's death's move. It can have mine, too. It's a perfect June morning, and I just turned 18. I can't even believe what I feel like today. Here am I, Lord, sitting on a suitcase, waiting for my train. The sun is shining. I'm never coming back. So, I did an evil thing. I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't have anything to do with it. But I would like to take full credit for it, but I can't. But, Poetry magazine, with which I at one time had a kind of a feud, public, which involved the humiliation of Franz Wright for like 2 years. Now has given me their award for the best material that they published in a whole year, the whole last year. That's going to cause some people to not know whether to shit or go blind, but or they'll be like ants, like where the current has been cut off and they don't know where to go or what to do. But so I thought I would read a couple of those. This one's called Imago, I think is the pronunciation, Imago, Imago. And I believe it has the most fascinating dual meaning of any word I've ever encountered. I believe that it's a Jungian philosophy word that has to do with the idealized figure formed in very, very early childhood, usually based on your parents or somebody, and held in your subconscious all your life, and you seek this person, this perfect person, failing, of course, to find them. But it also means, in the study of insects, the point at which a butterfly or moth reaches its sexual maturity, which coincides with its wings and flies away from the pupa and everything. That's a poem right there, right? And but anyway, Imago. Actually, the title has nothing to do with this piece at all. Sometimes that will happen, and it's like instead of putting a frame around a poem, you decide to make the title a part of the poem somehow. From my cell, I was staring at a cloud, a dog decaying in the woods, etc., as I took up the long-awaited sequel to my confessions. But this time, my hand was so far away that it looked like a small hairless spider whose progress I could hardly help but follow from the corner of one eye as it went on filling page after page in a notebook the size of a stamp with words too small for anyone to read. I looked up and noticed my bars had turned to gold. And before I forget, I'd like to be the first to congratulate everyone who has not committed suicide up until now. Camouflaged and lightless congregation, the world will never know your names, never know of its debt to you or what you suffered. With what uncomplaining anguish you sacrificed the one thing all hold most dear, most have in common, the sense of being completely different from anybody else. It just vanished at some point, having attained its sexual maturity and winged stage. You had a great vision about it, but told no one. We have misnamed death, life, and life, death. You saw another world, and it was precisely the same as this one. This time you told everyone until someone asked you very nicely to quiet down. And the weather, everything you have heard on that subject is a serious understatement. The scarlet horrors were preparing to file in for my ignominious obsequies. Already they swarmed freely over my body. Then there was no weather. I can't tell you how perfect that was. As it happens, I had been gazing up at the dusk stars as I can be found doing more or less day and night, for I like to think they are growing younger as I die. Come by sometime and tell me what you think. Under torture, some atrocious form of tickling, perhaps, I guess I'd describe myself as a fairly good egg in hot water. You're supposed to laugh now. Family motto roughly translates, April wizards bring May blizzards. We tend to be apprehended eventually after a futile but all the more spirited attempt at first-degree self-impersonation. However, this is not the time for levity. We happen to be speaking of a serious medical goodnight kiss. Traditionally, we are then detained at a local mental facility, known for its celebrated alumni, though in recent decades, secret and permanent socialist elements in the government have seen to it that the lowest scum of humanity now appear to have open access to those once hallowed halls, smeared with our shit and vomit. What I'm getting at is this. After a relatively brief stay, we are invariably released, with some deranged doctors or others blessing, a mixture of relief and disgust on the part of the staff, and the secret eye signal that will get you into any movie house in Milwaukee free for the next year. Don't ask me, I just write it down. Some of us like to get together once a day, rain or shine, and gather furtively at the picnic grounds under those tall, wavering candle flame pines, where neither moth nor rust can reach, nor faintest scream, and exchange ribald tales verging on satanic perversion, each drawing his iridescent injection from the same oceanic martini. Very dry, about 2 tears worth of vermouth in an unremembered dream. I wrote, this is a 1-sentence piece, and I put the dates, 1975 to 2010, because that's how long I've been working on this prose poem, which just ended up being this sentence. And if it ever occurs to me to try to rewrite it again, I'm going to chop off like one of my fingers first. Blade, if I stare into it long enough, the point comes when I don't know what it's called. A condition in which lacerations are liable to occur, like a slip of the tongue. When a drop of blood might billow in a glass of water, blooming in velvet detonation and imparting to it the colorless, tasteless, and originless fear in which I wake. I really like this next one, but it's kind of hard to read. I don't know. Some of them are just too hard. Well, I want to read them anyway. It's my responsibility, and I made them exist, and I have to pay for it. Well, I was just the instrument, and the instrument can't hear the music, so I have nothing to do with it at all. But why is it that, like, if you're a poet, everyone thinks every single thing you write is, like, literally about you speaking on, but if you're a fiction writer, nobody goes, did that really happen to you? Anyway, this is called Bees of Eleusis. You know, the Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece for 2,000 years previous to Christianity, the resurrection mysteries. Many people have tried to explain how it was that they kept these rites secret. Now, we all know that human beings cannot keep anything secret for 2 minutes. So, like, how 2,000 years? Some people speculate that they used in the rituals mind-altering substance, like ergot, you know, like what LSD was originally synthesized from a fungus that grows on a rye, and like, why not? They had Euclid and Pythagoras. I mean, they must have had chemists. So it's called Bees of Eleusis, and it starts with a quote from the mysterious fourth gospel. Unless a grain of wheat goes into the ground and dies, it remains nothing but a grain of wheat. And if you want to know more about this, you can read the hymn to Demeter in the Homeric hymns. The ingredients gathered a few small red tufts of the dream spore per sheaf of Demeter. It's Persephone, right? I mean, everyone knows she's swallowed up. But we always think it's like some kind of fairy tale. We're expected to accept it in the same spirit as like one of the German fairy tales or something, where horrific things happen and you go, ha ha, and it doesn't really hit home. What happens with Persephone's case is her uncle, Hades, the king of the dead, who is the brother of Demeter, who is the sort of somehow personification of the wheat and everything, decides he's going to rape his niece. And she conceives a child there and brings him back with her too, I think. It's much different when you read the actual texts. They're not nice. And they're like, wow, it's like when you read even Aeschylus or somebody where they're practicing human sacrifice still. The ingredients gathered a few small red tufts of the dream spore per sheaf of Demeter's blonde wheat, reaped in mourning in silence, ground up with the pollen and mixed into white wine and honey. These stored forms of light taken under the ground, taken by mouth, first by those who by birth hold in secret the word, then placed on the tongues of the new ones into whose ears it is meant to be whispered. Word murdered, forgotten so long ago, placed as a kiss on the lips of the soon-to-be no longer breathing, who mean to enter death with open eyes, with mouths saying, death? What death? We have no word for it in our country where the bride of a brighter oblivion reigns. Not the purple-haired god, but the child queen, the raped girl, come back from the dead, hand in hand with the child she conceived there, returned in a resurrected virginity, wind through green wheat. Present-day sight of a minor refinery in Christ, although by the 10th generation already the children of light in their dark garments had trampled and smashed and generally raped the 2,000 years of this precinct and its holy meal, intolerable mirror. Men who designed and bowed down to a law derived from the sayings of one who appeared here to say the law is abolished. It is too late. It is all over with. Men who bungled their way through the next 18 centuries before finally descending into the earth themselves, and what they found there they used, and we thank you for destroying the destroyers of the world. And here at the end, this is as good a time as any other entrance to the underplace, journey of the fallen leaf back to the branch, to the bees of Eleusis among olive blossoms, untroubled among crimson wildflowers. 4,000 years later, same flowers, same bees. And then this one, I'll read, and then a couple others. This is more, I guess it's more personal. In a way, they're never personal. I never think of them as, they seem like it. This is called Circle, and I don't know how to even say how something like this gets written. I mean, it's just like a way of thinking and associatively, and but not, but in a serious way about some things in your life and your fate. Say I had no choice. This weightless finger touched my tongue and told me to. It taught me. When kinder and more subtle methods failed, it put a gun to my head, a zero seared coldly in one temple, electrode glued chill to the other, the sniffer dogs rooting and snuffling in my crotch, the small white doorless room, the laser flashlight in one eye. You can't hear the voice when it utters, "Let there be speech," yet I faithfully spoke what I thought I was supposed to, inspired idiot, or dummy on the lap of language. The words themselves more real than I, words here before me, no, words here before we were and when we are not again. So I blurted it out, my initial soliloquies, what I could catch through the static, giving my head a good thump now and then, like one of those black and white TV sets, and projecting. Those were some vast stadiums, the first row of faces as far as near stars, and if there at all, never having the faintest idea what it meant. The microphone dead, I did my best. Tell them, inch-thick rope for ascot, eyes put out, chained to my oars, all the others long vanished. The first minute of death is so long, like the first minute of consciousness, there in the infinite darkness of somebody weeping. You never arrive, never reach shore, never mind with what clarity you seem to hear with your lips' distant roar of surf breaking in their names as well, sort of lip-syncing, but singing, yeah, so singing twice as loud, yeah, lip-syncing, but singing twice as loud, strapped to the mast, earways cleared, though I heard nothing but nothing, blue. Making up what I couldn't make out, and all that uproarious and pitiless derision I had to raise my voice above, I, mere link, out on that unknown ocean beating at my ears, just as at the beginning, the mother's heart booming softly. From nowhere it came, like me, months before I arrived to take up the sorry job of being me, whatever a month was, whatever I was then, blind little dolphin with a thumb in its mouth, whatever a mouth was. Poor mother mourning her own mother's dying over that actual ocean. She lay, a strong stone's throw from the Ohio, or that poison ghost of it. Mother of my mother dying away from this world, just as I was about to die into it. I see them there, up to their knees, gathered as for a baptism, cross traced in hydrochloric acid on a tiny forehead, right there at the dead water's edge, a sight of moon, a meteor in arc of falling axe of gold for the severing of hairy umbilical rope. Hear me out. I saw they were standing watch over her, and my mother's conspicuous absence, wincing at the constant cough. And I saw her whom I would never meet, nearing peace in the scarlet Magdalenian cerements, clenching lightly between thumb and skeletal forefingers, the scarlet egg and the wide river's sundering undertow, sucking to its breast her shrunken body, fetal in her narrow bed, nothing but a huckleberry craft by now, just vanishing around the first bend. More and more lost from sight by my mother, 22, unaided by lunatic mail she'd been sentenced to, from Goethe phase to Trogl phase. And she breaks down in her hotel room in bullet-pocked Vienna, helplessly swept down the blind, unwept current still flowing, sadnesses, chemistry, horrors, and guilts to this day through my veins. Months before we met, I listened to her crying. It went on forever. How not hear it, how not be fed it. In a shoreless darkness of sorrowing, I listened, still listen, and watch this and pay close attention. Nothing else there, only a listening called me, no name even, till they grave it in stone. Until we finally met, I watched her face rise on the horizon. Then there was some loud mutual screaming in the even more terrible blindness called light. Long before I invented the first word, it taught me, it told me the others, so many. So only what was never mine is mine. And when no one is listening, I sing what it means to me. Even now, hearing my voice through my own disappearing, farther away every day, my mother's fate and mine, now one as I board the ocean liner at 3 months of age and arrive in New York filled with space and time. I was, I can't believe I'm doing this, but someone asked me to read a particular poem, and I swear I cannot do it. It's so hard for me to read anything that I just wrote, let alone something from a while ago. But if you tell me who you are, I'll give you a private reading, whatever, yeah. I just can't bring myself to do it. All I see is the flaws and the bungled opportunities. These are kind of related. Portrait of two saints and cutting. I'll read. All the Sylvia Plath fan clubs will be meeting on campus tonight. Same as any other night, same as any other college, at undisclosed hours, alone in our dorm rooms, busily calculating the number of carrot sticks we'll be allowed to consume the next day, and occasionally scolding ourselves in funny voices while we wait for it to be time to take powerful, long-acting amphetamines. Our meds, the ones that help us concentrate better, definitely, on what we will soon be doing with our razors. Oh, see the great brightly lit party boats traveling faster and faster through the darkness toward a gigantic waterfall of blood. I feel a lot of sympathy for all those disorders. I was one of the first anorexics before they had a term for it. I thought I made it up. It was a superpower. Portrait of two saints. The first one is Saint Teresa of Avila, and this is simply a straight description of something that historically, literally took place. In my own words. When it had become clear that the deceased was not about to relinquish either the mysterious failure to rot or the pervasive and oddly annoying fragrance of roses in which he'd been lying in bed for some months, wearing an expression of profoundly childlike happiness, shining eyes wide open, a white sheet pulled up to her chin, the final reaction of her associates was unpleasant, to say the least. It was as if such an unprecedented period of mourning, awe, enforced silence, and increased bewilderment over how to proceed with the funeral had nourished and gradually allowed the dark gestation of a general but mutually unacknowledged wish, until, in one sudden and uncontrollable venting of lust to acquire sacred relics, they simply tore the body apart. The ownership of its various limbs, and anatomically, let's just leave it at that, was then savagely contested as if by black cassocked guerrillas. One hastens to add that this deplorable but surely unpremeditated behavior was instigated by a single individual acting alone, none other than Teresa's longtime acquaintance and confidant, Father Gracian, who comported himself from the first in the most discreet manner, believing himself to be completely unobserved when he stole into the glowing silence of her room with the kitchen's meat cleaver concealed in his sleeve and a cutting board tucked deftly under his arm, and, coughing loudly to cover the sound of the blow, hacked off one of her weightless white hands. Well, they're human beings, what do you want? The second one's called Bernadette. You know what the problem is? Jung writes magnificent, I'm not a big Jungian, I keep saying it, but he wrote a magnificent book called Answer to Job, in which he addresses this issue. What do you get when you have a community of people who are told they must be utterly perfect, not only in their actions, but in their thoughts? You get dark stuff happens. Bad things, the shadow builds and erupts, and that happens. And Jesus would have had one more reason to cry. Bernadette. Bernadette was the little girl that Mary appeared to. One of the things that Mary allowed her to tell people that she said to her was, I cannot promise you happiness in this life. She saw her like 16 times, and some of the things she was told she was allowed to say. It's where Lourdes, the healing place, is. She had, like at Medjugorje, there's another documented sighting of children being visited by. She was examined by. I don't have any opinion one way or the other on this. I think the world's sufficiently supernatural for me. I don't need any extra supernatural stuff to happen. But the greatest detectives in Europe at the time interrogated her, and all came out saying she was telling the truth. Anyway, Bernadette. Sister moth, chewing and chewing through the night. Sister rust, fungus, and mildew, all three hard at work, already scrubbing each individual mirror and stone to a dull, filthy green. A single tear of acid rolling down each of their cheeks. Meanwhile, Sister maggots busy kissing one by one the endless orphan infants in their cradles until she finds herself looming above the first one again, smiling in sudden recognition when it smiles at her. A sun begins to rise, revealing the hundreds of bodiless wheelchairs and crutches standing in a ring around the monastery wall, along with a lone white-winged cane tapping shyly at the back door, the locked door with the sign stating clearly that the child is ill today and will not be healing anyone. Well, she performed a couple of miracles, and that was it. And she had horrible asthma. She died of. And another beautiful thing she said was that it was when accused of malingering by her fellow nuns. She said, "It is my job to be sick." I'm just going to read one more, I think. I was telling somebody recently in an interview about being I got to be the had a position as writer-in-residence at Brandeis University for a few years. And I told the story of how one day I discovered the monument to the 6 million dead, and the 16 names of the death in concentration camps, which I copied on, and how they entered into this, writing this piece, but in lots of strange ways. It's called 5 After Midnight. You wake up in an upstairs bedroom of a strange house with no idea where it is, no other house in sight. Although it is completely dark and impenetrably snowing swiftly sideways past the window, somehow you know this. Faraway traffic sounds of New York City at dusk, the dim golden horns of Christ the Conqueror approaching, still and sad. You are 15, riding the night train south through Germany, and you are having trouble telling half the time if you are awake or asleep. Abandoned, I was going to meet my father in Vienna. Abandoned platforms lit by a flickering greenish fluorescence, signs announcing the familiar names of towns you've stopped at for oddly long periods of time, replaced somehow by names unknown: Kluga, Chelmno, Transnistria, Gurs, and the ones who are speechlessly staring at you through a wire fence, the sun shining right through them, all have the faces of people you know. You grope for the cell phone, but it is 1968 and such devices have not yet been offered for sale to the general public. Damn right, too. These things are killing us, but without them, how would we ever call home? Good news, ghosts of snow drifting over the highway. Soon we shall all be a part of all that we now merely see. Like that ancient apple tree in Normandy in full blossom, white wind-loosed petals blowing across your lawn, bee-haunted, the sunlit sea, dead leaves scurrying in the wind down West Lorraine Street. They look just like countless brown tarantulas. And you are 4 years old, lying awake to the sound of Seattle's perpetual rain, fog obscuring the rose-colored dawn of Rainier, your snowman sinking back into the ground, hand in hand with your father towering above you as he quietly hums Die Forelle, Opus 33, or sings aloud, Ich habe mir ein Kamerad, ein besser findest du nicht. A song of soldiers in the German army. They must have sometimes sung a few bars, nose black with frostbite. Overall, however, the world is probably not doing all that much singing. Being somewhat closer to their level, you are taking care not to step on the earthworms you've counted as they attempt to cross the sidewalk. It's their job. What can they do? A naked girl of 16 stands in your doorway reading a letter and smiling into herself. And it occurs to you with unusual clarity that dying is one thing in your life you ought to get right. You must learn to be okay with being alone, but it is also good to know how to befriend pretty much anybody, and fast. As you suspected, no one you terribly miss is in the same state as you, even. Strangely, this has not prevented a lot of them from making an appearance, examining the stupid paintings or gazing out that window. You are so glad to see them, you would like to cry. But why? What difference does it make? Clearly, they can't hear you, and they never look at you, and you need to get used to that, as these are the final moments of your life. Thank you.